Hey everybody, I'm Jack Rita with Future Pastimes, and I'm a designer on Dune-themed games and expansions. And in this video, I want to talk about the two Dune movies. And I'm really going to talk about everything I didn't like about the movies or things that bothered me. But I do want to preface all of that by saying that I think these movies are great. I think they're fantastic adaptation of the book. They make it very accessible. And this is a book that before the Lynch movie was considered unfilmable. And even after the Lynch movie, there were some who considered it unfilmable because it didn't quite work out. It didn't make a ton of sense to a lot of people. It made plenty of sense to people who knew the book really well. And I think dividing it into two movies was key to making it more successful. But I think that as good as these movies are, and I think they're great, keep in mind, I think that and I liked the Lynch movie, but I understood its flaws, and there was a lot that I could do about how that could have been better. But let's focus on the Villeneuve movies and why some of the things I think that they changed or that they left out, I really wish that they had reconsidered. And I want to start off right off the bat with talking about the script. And the one thing that kind of bothers me the most about it is the fact that very little of the dialogue from the book has made it into Villeneuve's script. Now, if you look at the Lynch movie, a lot of the dialogue, a majority of the dialogue, is taken straight out of the book. And you can have a debate about how, well, it's a movie. You don't necessarily have to be slavishly true to the book. But some of those lines of dialogue are part of the reason why many people love the book. And I'm a longtime fan. I first read it about 40 years ago. It's one of my favorite books. I've read it, I think, at least 8 times. And I always find new stuff in the book, new insights into it. I enjoy it more and more each time that I read it. And I love a lot of that. And to me, it feels a lot like that the screenwriters for the Villeneuve movie, and it's Villeneuve and John Spates, I hope I'm saying that right. To me, it feels like they're going out of their way to not sound like the Lynch movie, and that kind of plays out in a few different ways, but the dialogue being first and foremost. And I find that the Lynch movie is infinitely quotable. A lot of people will, if you say a line from that movie, people know what you're talking about, and they relish saying it. And, certainly it's a more over the top than the Villeneuve take on it. But it's still possible to use the same line of dialogue and just present it in a more grounded way, which overall the Villeneuve movie feels more grounded than the Lynch one does. So when we're adapting it, it came across to me like somebody who had read Dune years ago and really loved it and decided to write the screenplay without immediately rereading the book and using that as your guidepost. A lot of the story beats are different. A lot of the focus is different, but all of the dialogue. In fact, the only line that I can think of off the top of my head that appears in the book and in both movies is the slow blade penetrates the shield. And that's it. And I think that, like I said, that bugs me a little bit that they felt like they couldn't, it seemed like they felt like they couldn't use any of those lines, and they were really, really going out of their way. And I know that Villeneuve in some interview talked about how much he doesn't care about the dialogue. It's all about the visuals. And I think that that's kind of dumb. I think the dialogue is important, and, and that's fine. Speaking of dialogue, though, and something straight out of the book that has bugged me for a while after seeing the first movie is the Litany of Fear. It is so central to Dune it is a really important part of the overall story. It's an important part about the makeup of many of the characters, in particular Paul, but also Jessica, and then by extension the Bene Gesserit sisterhood, the litany of fear. It's so important, and it's a theme of the book. I must not fear, and how your control over fear opens up possibilities. And I feel like it really got shortchanged in that first movie. In the book, it's really Paul who is using the litany of fear to help him get through this test with the Gom Jabbar in the box. But in the movie, it's Jessica, and we can barely understand anything that she's saying. The sound is just really overwhelmed by the music, and I think what they really should have done is, I'm fine with her doing it, but I would have liked Paul to have been maybe muttering or mouthing the words along with her. Maybe we're hearing Jessica, but we see his lips move for part of it, and we're getting that he is using it. He's tapping into his training. He's not just on his own completely in this scene. He's using his mother's training, and I think that is it's such an important part of the book, and it does not come across very well at all in the movie. So people who are not familiar with the book, they're not going to get that. They're not really getting much of a sense of how much training Paul has received from his mother, other than tinkering with the voice. And I think that's important, and we do see Paul later on. He in the ornithopter scene, and again it's just Jessica with the litany of fear, and he's really tapping into something else. He's tapping into prescience to get advice from Jamis, and so again, it seems disconnected. So I was a little disappointed in this, and I wish that they had done something different with that. Another major area that really let me down was the treatment of the Mentats in the movies. We don't get a really strong sense that these are human computers. But more than that, both of these Mentats in particular, they are also masters of assassins. They are really an important part of the great houses, and they come across, and I've done a whole little video on it, on how they're the accountants of Dune. That's how they come across. Thufir is calculating how much it would cost the guild to come out and, for the emperor to send somebody out just for a signing ceremony. And he's part of the battle planning, where they're talking about how much money not really battle planning, but how much money that the Harkonnens were getting off of Arrakis. And he's in charge of security, but it really just doesn't feel like the death. And I think that with Piter, it's even less so. He's not really very involved in any of the planning, any of the plotting of what goes on, and we don't get a sense of who this character is. In the book, he's a twisted Mentat. He's a psycho. He's bloodthirsty. He's lusting after Jessica, and he's also addicted to spice. He's got the eyes of a bod in the book, but we don't really get that, and that's fine. They didn't do that in the Lynch movie either. But in the Lynch movie, Piter comes across as a very devious character, and he's the one who kills Yui, and he talks about breaking Yui's conditioning, and so we get a much better sense of the Lynch Piter than we do the Villeneuve. And David Desmalchian doesn't really get to do much. He goes off to Seleucia to talk to the Sardaukar, and he makes a slip up there, a slip of the tongue. We're talking about the Atreides are the best fighting force. I think Piter is smarter than that to say that to a Sardaukar captain. So I just really did not like how the Mentats were not leveraged at all. They weren't explained. They weren't leveraged. It was a huge waste, and I think that is very unfortunate. The other major thing I had with the first movie is that just it felt so rushed to me. I felt like that the Atreides were on Arrakis for a day and a half and then they were attacked, which is not what happens. They're there for a while, and we know that they filmed some element of the banquet scene, and maybe not the full banquet. Maybe it's we're at the banquet because this is what this is. They're getting ready. You can see how Duncan is in his dress uniform there, clean shaven for the banquet. And there's also the picture of Liet Kynes in a nice party dress. And so I really felt like this would have helped to establish them on Arrakis, because again, it just felt like they get there, they have their whole arrival ceremony, and then they're talking about how much spice they have to get, and Duncan is there with Stilgar, and then they're off with Liet, and then that night they're getting attacked. That's what it feels like, and so it just felt too rushed on Arrakis, and there were a number of other elements that take place in this time. The biggest one is the whole idea of the traitor. And, I think Dr. Yui also gets shortchanged. And I really wanted to have some more about the idea that there's no way Dr. Yui could be the traitor because of his imperial conditioning. That's the whole point of the imperial conditioning. That's what that diamond tattoo signifies. Trustworthiness can do absolutely no harm to the people under his care. And there's a really nice subplot in the book. I enjoy it. And it's where after Paul saves Shout-Out Mapes from the Hunter-Seeker, she lets him know that the Fremen know that there's a traitor. And they get this information, and the Duke gets it, and all of the intelligence is pointing towards Jessica, and he's like, there's no way. And I really enjoyed that. And the fact that Gurney is convinced that it's Jessica, and all of the machinations of that, and how it's tearing the house apart, and no one knows who to trust, and I was missing that in the movie, and it was just all hunky dory, and the reveal of Yui being the traitor was just kind of like, okay, whatever, and off we go. And so there's a nice scene in the Lynch movie where they're scanning the Fremen potential housekeepers and staff, and Jessica has a nice scene with Yui, and she understands, she learns how much Yui seems to hate the Harkonnens, but there's something else, and Yui is trying to hide it, and it's really well done in the book. He's hoping that his genuine grief over what is going on with his wife will cover the fact, because he knows that she's a truthsayer, or she has those capabilities. And so it's a really tricky situation for him. So I just really missed that, and I felt like the movie just didn't really care about that at all. And so it comes across. Moving into the second movie, one of the things that kind of bugged me, and it's going to seem like a very nitpicky thing, but is a scene early on where Jessica and Paul, they've right after all the Harkonnens have been killed, and they see the Fremen are rendering them for their water. They're sucking out all of the fluids and converting it into water, and Jessica gets a little bit queasy and then barfs. And this is really uncharacteristic for the Bene Gesserit. They are all about total control over their bodies, and it doesn't matter that she's pregnant as well. She converts a deadly poison in her body while pregnant, and I think that this, while an amusing scene, a cute little moment, would have been better to have Paul be the one who gets sick, because it would have been a nice way for the other Fremen to not think of him as such a strong, stoic character. Here he is. He may have done well fighting the Harkonnen, but then he got, queasy seeing them, rendering them down. And it would have been a nice thing for them to tease him about in those early scenes. And I think it's a missed opportunity, because there's just no way that Jessica would have spit up the water, especially after Stilgar, chastises her about don't let it out. she is a Bene Gesserit. She's, on the verge of becoming a Reverend Mother. So no, this did not did not play out very true. The other part about this was just the notion of once you have endured the agony and you've tapped into your ancestral memories. I didn't really feel like they did a good job with that. They've done it a much better job on the Dune Prophecy series, and yes, they've got certainly more time, and they're taking their time in those episodes. But they hardly barely explain what it is and what's going on and what you're getting out of it, and really important that is. I mean, they say, yeah, we don't want to lose her memories, but it's just such a throwaway line that it doesn't. I talked to people who saw the movie and they didn't get that at all. They didn't understand what you get out of becoming a Reverend Mother, or what it is. This idea that in the trauma of converting that poison is what unlocks your ability to tap into your ancestral memories. And I think that is that's another opportunity. This is central to the Dune mysticism. It's so important to the power of the Kwisatz Haderach, or part of what that power is, and how Paul will be able to leverage that. That went over a lot of people's heads, and so as accessible as the movies are on a whole, this important detail, I think, could have been done a little bit better. Moving on to Feyd. Now, I really did not think I was going to enjoy the black and white segment on Gedi Prime. To me, it felt like they were trying to get out of an R rating with violence, and even in black and white, you can hardly see any blood in this scene. But I thought they handled it really well. So this is not actually a quibble. I rather enjoyed it, but it's the treatment of Feyd, and there's an important part in the book here having to do with this arena scene, and it has to do with the fact that Lanville here is not drugged. That was actually something that Feyd was privy to. He knew that was going to happen, not the Baron, and that was the whole point. And I really feel like it chips away at who Feyd is. And the other thing is that there's a lot of devious stuff that Feyd does in this segment in the book. We see the two knives here. Well, the two knives, the significance of the black knife and the white blade, is that one is poison, and this is a traditional thing, and everyone in this stadium knows that one blade has poison and one blade doesn't. But he switches it. Even the people that he's fighting against, the slaves, they know one of these blades is poison. Off the top of my head, I can't remember which one is supposed to be, but he switches it. And the other thing is that the slaves have got the trigger word. And for Feyd, it's when he says scum, it's going to trigger this temporary paralysis in the guy that he's fighting who is not drugged. And that is his safety net in order, in case things go wrong, which they do. He's in a pickle, and he ends up using yet another devious trick in order to ensure success. So all these steps, all these devious, underhanded things that Feyd does were all stripped out. All of them were stripped out. And it really, I think, diminishes Feyd as a character. I know that they wanted to prop him up as somebody who is, he's just so good that he is a threat to Paul. I think they could have done both. They could have had their cake. They could have eaten their cake by having him really good, but also really devious. And part of this deviousness also feeds into his relationship with the Baron. The Baron has the upper hand in the movie, and he only barely manages to keep the upper hand in the book. He has to stay a step ahead of Feyd because Feyd is trying to kill him and become the Baron early. And I didn't like this choice of that. I guess, they wanted the Stellan Skarsgård Baron to be a much more cerebral and cunning character. But this was the only way that manifests in the movie. And for the rest of the movie, the Baron is just not that formidable. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on. But this whole element of Feyd trying to kill the Baron, I really was sorely missed. And part of that was that they cut out all of the stuff with Tufir Hawat being captured by the Harkonnen. So they don't even show that in the first movie, and in fact, they never share his fate. So I guess audiences are just left to assume he died, but he doesn't die. He's captured, and he's forced to be their replacement Mentat, and he's given the residual poison and told he has to keep, he's got to keep taking the antidote every day, otherwise he'll die very painfully. And so, but he ostensibly is helping them, but he's really plotting against them. And it's just such a great, juicy element. And his whole thing is like, I need a chance to make sure that I can see Jessica dead for what she did to the Atreides and to me. And so that, again, the whole traitor thing was not really played out very interestingly. And the element of Thufir was, again, the Mentat's shortchanged. His Mentat brain wasted in these movies, which is very sad. I think the Mentats are a fascinating element. It really feeds into that whole reason why they don't have advanced technology and artificial intelligence and lots of computers, and how the entire Imperium society is all turned inward onto advancing humanity. That's what the Sisterhood is about. That's what the Guild is about. And the Mentats are an important part of that. They are replacing computers. And we just, audiences do not get that. They don't take that away at all. Now, getting back to the deviousness of Feyd, first of all, this knife fight I thought was great. The choreography, amazing. It was a great fight. I didn't think that, when Paul says, may thy knife chip and shatter, having Feyd just say the same thing, I thought was a little bit silly and a missed opportunity to have him say something a little more cutting and, nasty. But I was super disappointed that we didn't get his hidden blade. And again, it's just the way that the book treats this segment is so well done. They've got the way that Feyd keeps presenting one side of his body to Paul, and Paul picks up on that in the book, and he's like, he suspects some kind of trick or something hidden in there. And what's really going on is Feyd has it, but it's on the other side. And he's done this whole sort of, schemes within schemes thing. He fools Paul into thinking that it's the side that keeps facing him that's the really dangerous side, so that Paul maneuvers himself into the other side and almost gets caught with the poison needle. And I really missed that. Again, it really just takes Feyd down a notch in just his cunning and his deviousness and his planning ahead. And I really, as much as I liked this knife fight, it was the one element that I think would have taken it, through the roof. And again, for that whole last half of the movie, the Baron is really not doing much of anything. And he's not showing off his big brain. He's not, leveraging his particular cunning, and he kind of, ends up, the Sardaukar cut his suspensors, and he's crawling up the steps kind of in a desperate, pathetic way, and then Paul walks in and just sticks a knife in his neck, and that's that. I understand, the whole not having him killed by Alia. And I was fine with the way they did that. I think I understand, not having to have like a 2-year-old running around or a CGI Gollum like little sister and the time jump. I mean, I did miss them not having their original Leto II. I think that really would have raised the stakes with the soldiers finding the baby when they raid the siege, and Paul learning that his son is dead. But they compressed the timeline, and they're like, they didn't even give Jessica enough time to give birth to Alia, so there was no way that Chani was going to give birth. So but that didn't really bother me so much as the fact that it would just kind of, the Baron petered out and didn't really have much of an impact. The same with the Emperor. The Emperor doesn't really show up in the book until the very end, and he doesn't have a whole lot to do, which is fine. But with the movie, you can have the Emperor. We can see the Emperor more, and we did, and I think we saw the Emperor just about enough times. But Christopher Walken didn't really do much with the role, and I think part of the reason that it bothered me is that in the book, Irulan explains that her father is the age of Christopher Walken, but comes across as a much younger man, like in his late 30s. And it's, all the spice and all the whatever else he's doing to, but here he just seemed kind of feeble and really seemed his age. And I guess, they were trying to use Walken as, all right, here's somebody with a lot of presence, but at the same time, this is an emperor that doesn't have a lot of power, or is not really the one calling the shots. I don't know. I just think that it was a miscasting. You still could have gotten that across with somebody else. And again, I just really was not impressed with their treatment of the Emperor, and what he contributes to the movie. The last thing, again, which I thought it's more of a quibble, and it's just at the end when Paul says he's going to marry the Emperor's daughter, Irulan, and Chani just kind of storms out. Of course, that's not how the book ends. Paul makes clear at the end of the book that he is never going to stop loving Chani. She's the only woman for him, and that the princess will be his wife in name only, and she will get nothing from him. And he doesn't really make that kind of effort. Doesn't really seem to make any effort to convey that. And it's Jessica who consoles. It's a nice moment where Jessica has this connection with Chani, where she knows what Chani is the position that she's been put in, but she also knows that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that she's just a concubine. They're the true wives, as far as anyone is concerned. And it was a nice way. There's no connection between Chani and Jessica in this movie. In the book, they are not well aligned until toward the very end, but we didn't get that, so I was a little bit let down by that. But certain other things that were changed didn't bother me at all. It didn't, as much as I liked the Count Fenring, and I liked the idea that he's this character that Paul completely, his prescience has been eluded by Count Fenring and what Count Fenring, but it's so quick and minor in the book that even like the first couple of times that I read it, I didn't even understand what was going on. So I didn't miss Count Fenring not being there, and I thought that the way they handled the Margot Fenring stuff was really good. And and she does not give Feyd the Gamjabar box test in the book, but she does get his seed. So that was clear, and we got that across. But I liked how they did that. It was an interesting take on it. And I thought it was well done. And of course, this segment right here is all the reason you need to go and love Dune Part 2. And in the book, of course, the battle is barely described at all. But this battle is fantastic, I think, in the movie. It's really well done. It's very cool. The shield wall blows open, and the storm kind of blows through, and the Sardaukar are like, what's coming? And then bunch of sandworms suddenly right in there in their faces. And then you get Chani and all of her Fedaykin, rushing in and fighting the Sardaukar. That, it probably could have gone on even longer. But I loved what we did get. And I really thought how they handled the reason that the jihad is going to happen anyway. As much as Paul is trying to fight it, he's trying to avoid it. I thought the way that they explained it and justified it and depicted it was even better than in the book. Wasn't really clear to me that, again, the first couple of times I read it, I was like, I don't see why Paul unleashes the Fremen. But here it makes a lot more sense. They're showing that the Landsraad refused to accept Paul, because the focus in the book is a lot more on the guild. The guild is like, we have to capitulate. We have to give in to Paul's demands because we know what he's going to be able to do by destroying the spice, and we know the effect it's going to have, and we are terrified of that. And so it's really the guild leading the way. But despite that, despite the guild's insistence that Shaddam give in and whatnot, Paul still has the jihad. So that was the part that really didn't make sense to me early on as a teenager reading Dune. It wasn't until much later that I started to go, oh yeah, extrapolating what was going on. And so this was handled, I think, a little bit clearer and very concisely. So, like I said, these are great movies. Absolutely fantastic. I love them. I think they're a really great adaptation. I'm really looking forward to the next one. I know that there's a lot of people who are like, oh, Dune Messiah is my favorite one of the series. It is not my favorite book in the series. One of the reasons why I liked the first book so much is because of how action-packed it is. And those are the things that I loved. All of the action, and it's small action, big action. The box scene with the Gom Jabbar, to me, feels like an action scene, and the shield training, and the hunter seeker, and all of the knife duels, fighting Jamis, and the arena, and fighting Feyd. Just so action packed, and I don't feel that Messiah has a lot of action. Now it is much more of I've heard it described as the whole book is basically the end of Godfather and Godfather 2, where Michael Corleone basically consolidates power and takes all the other pieces off the board. It's all, the whole book is driving towards that, and it's all about the back alley scheming and the intrigue of conspiracy. And so I have no doubt that it's going to be good, and I really look forward to see how they elevate it, because I think that they will. I hope they do show some of the jihad, the miniseries, the second miniseries, which is a combination of Dune Messiah and Children of Dune. I think is a really great adaptation. It's a great way to combine those two books, because you get a little more action from Children, and you get all of the other stuff from Messiah, the Stone Burner, and the conspiracy, which is great. But they're not going to really they're not folding Children of Dune into this next movie, I suspect, because it's just going to be the one movie, so it'll be just Messiah. But that miniseries did have a little bit. They showed the very tail end. They showed it really wasn't about the jihad, the battle. It was the aftermath. I'm hoping we'll get some of this, and they don't do a Star Wars like we're about to have the Clone Wars in one movie, and in the next movie, boy, those Clone Wars were sure bad, weren't they? Now that it's over, I'm hoping they don't do that, but who knows? They'll probably sort that out, and I am looking forward to how they, if they do have Anya Taylor-Joy as Alia. And that budding romance with the Gola, how they handle that, and what kind of time jump are we talking about here, and whatnot. And I suspect that even with that kind of a time jump, there's still going to be some hackles on Chani, because that was a big setup at the end of the second movie, was her going back to the Fremen and abandoning Paul. Because of his choices there. And so if enough time has passed that we've got an Anya Taylor-Joy aged Alia, then is she still mad at him? I don't know. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they square all those circles. And yeah, so let me know in the comments, what parts of the movies bugged you. I'm not looking to get into an argument with people telling me I'm wrong. Feel free if you think I am wrong. But I'm more interested in validation, if I'm being honest. So by all means, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and keep watching Dune. If you haven't seen the movies and I've spoiled them for you, you have my apologies, but I'm not sure why you would sit through a video talking about what I didn't like about the movies if you haven't seen them and were, like, I'm going to go see these movies, but I want to see what this guy has to say first. Yeah, I'm sorry if you got spoiled, but I think you have yourself to blame, I think, for that. So that's it for this one, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.